Today we're going to paint horses, and as my horses have got cadians on top, and the fact that I've already done a video for those, we can jump forward a little bit. You'll notice that I haven't painted the weapon, and the reason why I haven't painted the weapon is going to get in the way of painting the horse down the side here, so it's best to paint the horse first. But I have at this point painted the saddle, which has been painted with the same colour as green as the rest of it, which helps to tie it in some. One thing that's a little bit different from the cadians is because the saddle's got these lines and also these little bits here, I'm going to apply a little bit of this shade into those lines just to give a little bit of a texture, but otherwise it's the same. And we're just doing this, like I said, just to make those lines just a little bit darker, and it adds a little bit of character into the saddle area. Next I'm going to start applying paint on the horse. I'm actually going to do two different horses in this video. Basically the reason for that is my sergeant, I want to give him a different coloured horse to try and make him stand out, but the rest of the models I actually want to try and make them blend in rather than standing out. So I'm using the talon sand, which is actually therefore the same colour as the cloth areas, and like I said, this will therefore help them blend in rather than standing out. You'll also notice things like the reins at this point haven't been painted, but that's because it's easier to paint the flesh areas of the horse first and then get to the reins later. And I'm going to apply the paint onto the hair of the horse as well, but the hair will look different later on. Next we're going to start putting some highlights into the muscles. So I'm doing a 50-50 mix to thin down the upper bone. For the most part, this thin down paint has just been applied once. However, some of the more prominent muscle areas and these two muscles for the upper legs and on the neck, I've applied a second coat to bring it out a bit more. Next we're using upper bone again, only this time we're using the paint alone, we're not adding any thinners into it. And with a small amount on the brush, we just want to pick out some of the details for the hair areas. You don't have to go too over the top with this, it's just to pick out some hairs, that's all. This area here is the ear, so it's not really what we're aiming for. For the mane and the tail, I've applied a coat of Agrax Earthshade, and with this one I've applied one coat. This one I've applied the coat, let it dry, and then put a second coat on, which makes it slightly darker. I also applied a small amount into the nostril of the nose for this with the same paint. Now I'm using Abaddon Black. I've applied it on the eye, and I'm going to put it on the inside of the mouth. By putting the black on the inside of the mouth, when we paint the teeth later, it'll make the teeth stand out a bit more. And we're also going to cover the hooves. Next comes the socks and stockings. For this one I've decided I'm going to give him a stocking, and I'm using Corax White first. And I would suggest applying the paint this way as opposed to doing it this way, because you don't want a perfectly even line going around. A more jagged line would look more natural. So as you can see, there's a stocking, and this one has got two socks. Next we're going to use white scar, and the white scar is going to act as a bit of a highlight on that previous white paint we applied. And I find because we're painting horses, which obviously are fur, helps to have a little bit of roughness rather than trying to be really smooth with your paint, because it is fur, you're not painting armour. One last coat for the white. We're going to use the white scar again with a 50-50 mix of water, and the reason I'm using water as opposed to using lime medium is I want it to be more transparent. And what we're going to do is apply it on the top here in between these two colours, and the reason we're doing this is these colours, as the fur wouldn't be a perfect line of one colour and then a perfect line of the other. You'll find there'll be a little bit of a blend between the two, where the fur is both the light colour and the dark. So by adding just a little bit of white wash like this, it gives you an area where it's not quite one colour and it's not quite the other. I said at the beginning of the video I was going to do two different colours of horses, so this is the next colour, and I'm starting off with Gawthorn Brown. Gawthorn Brown is a layer paint and I'm going to put another paint over this in a minute, which is a base paint. Technically speaking, you should be applying the paints the opposite way around, but you'll see why later. Next, I mixed dryad bark with lime medium. 1 part the paint, 3 parts the medium. We've got a nice chocolatey brown horse at the moment. Also, while we're here, we may as well put a wash on the mane and the tail. I'm going to put something else on the mane and the tail later, which will make it darker still, but this means it's a bit darker than the main colour, would help to encourage that darkness. Next, for the highlights, we're going to add white scar, but we're going to apply a lot of lime medium in, and the reason why we're doing this is we want to keep the white very thin, because dark skinned horses like the browns and the blacks, for example, the highlight tends to end up looking white. In fact, even with this, you can see with the reflection, because of its darkness and colour, the reflection looks white, where these, because they're lighter colour, it doesn't catch quite the same. So the highlights, for the most part, are going to end up going in the same places as before, but you just want to try and make sure they're fine lines. You don't want thick lines making it overbearingly white. One of the main places which is going to be a little bit different is the neck here. On the other models I cover the whole area, where for this I suggest just a little line at the top, a bit hard to get into, but just up here. And where on the other models I covered the front with the highlight, with this one I won't. I might just pick out a few areas like the cheeks, for example. As before, the hair for the mane and the tail is going to be done the same, only this time I'm doing it with null oil. I've just painted these straps, the reins and the harness on the face, and I've chosen to do it the same green as I have the rest of the miniature, again for the same reason as why I painted the horse this colour, to help it tie in. And now it's time to do the stars and stripes, which will be done with white scar. So a lot of horses can have a pattern on the head. The main thing to remember is to not try and make it perfect. You don't want a perfectly exact straight line, for example, because it's a horse's fur, it's natural, so it wouldn't be perfectly straight. In fact, it could even be somewhat lopsided. As you see here, the way I'm painting it, it's more on one side of the face than it is the other, rather than trying to make it perfect. And on this one we'll do a star instead. Start off with something basic like that, and then just build it up a bit more in the centre. Again, you're trying to make it so it's not perfect, it's an odd shape. You can also do muzzles as well, which is the front part here where you got the upper mouth and the nose area. You see quite a lot of horses with a white muzzle. I suggest looking at some pictures, because you'll probably notice as well where the front would be white, a lot of the time at the back here it's slightly pinkish, so you might want to look at that if that's something you're interested in. Next, now for these miniatures, I obviously need to finish them off by painting the weapons and doing the bases. If you like the video, remember to like, share, and click on the button on the lower right hand side to subscribe.